Hey everybody, it's Mr. Wagstaff. Cool stuff to talk about today. So, the last few days we've been talking about amendments, and we're going to continue talking about amendments today. What's cool is that the amendments now, after the Bill of Rights, which all got added in, those were the first 10 amendments that got added in before the Constitution was accepted, is that every amendment that we've had after the Bill of Rights has a unique story that goes along with it. And we got a bunch of cool stories today to talk about the amendments that we're going to be talking about today. So without further ado, let's hop in because these are really cool. Yesterday we had talked about the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, which ended slavery, made all citizens equal under the eyes of the law, and gave African Americans the right to vote. Pivotal amendments. And we'll talk about in later units how some of those amendments were attempted to be circumvented for quite a while after the Civil War. But that's another lesson. So today, let's start talking about more of these amendments, and each one of them is really, really cool. All right, so today, we're going to be talking about the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st Amendments. To you, they might just seem to be numbers, but they are really cool. And just like yesterday, when we started with the 11th Amendment, which basically has to do with what state can sue who and how the federal government intervenes when one state tries to sue another. And you're like, that's not really exciting. The 16th Amendment is kind of like that too. It's not super exciting. All right, so here's what the 16th Amendment is. The 16th Amendment, all right, it says, the Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived without apportionment among the several states and without regard to any census or enumeration. What? Because they're written in legalese while simultaneously being written like over 100 years ago, they can be somewhat hard to discern. Here's basically what the 16th Amendment says. The 16th Amendment is really important. It is incredibly important, but it's not super exciting. But let me explain to you what it is. Income tax. Basically, when you get paid by your employer, you pay an income tax on that. According to the way it is set up in the 16th Amendment, it used to be everybody paid the same amount. Now, not everybody at the time paid income tax, but everybody paid the same amount. It paid like 10%, 15%, whatever it was of their taxes went to the government. However, what ended up happening, and so people talk about wanting to do that today, like just simplify the tax code, flat tax. That's how it was originally. What ends up happening though is the people who don't make a lot of money and they desperately need all their money, if they're paying 15% in taxes, that's a lot because they don't have very much money to pay in taxes. Whereas somebody who might make, $10 million, 15% isn't that much, doesn't really affect their life. So to try to make it fair, the 16th Amendment is very much designed to help out poor people, people with a lower income. So what it does is the 16th Amendment makes a progressive income tax, meaning the less money that you make, the lower percentage that you pay in taxes. The more money that you make, the higher percentage that you pay in taxes. And it's on like a scale system. So I could go in and break down charts and stuff of how the 16th Amendment affects different income brackets, but you might mutiny on me if I do that. So I'm not going to do that here, not in this course with civic literacy. So we are going to just understand that the 16th Amendment is a progressive income tax. It is designed to help people who don't make a bunch of money. All right? Very good. So we're going to hop right into the 17th Amendment. And you're like, all right, here comes the good ones. Oh, you're going to be mad at me. So the 17th Amendment I find really cool because I like how politics interact with each other. Not everybody does. So the 17th Amendment. Now, two things on the 17th Amendment. Number one, I think it's cool. You might not, but that's okay. Completely fine to not think the 17th Amendment isn't cool. I think it is. The second one is test and final exams, especially if they're created by the state, love to ask about the 17th Amendment because they're like, bet nobody taught this. Here it is. All right, so the 17th Amendment, Here's what it says. The Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state, elected by the people thereof for 6 years, and each senator shall have 1 vote. The electors in each state shall have the qualifications and requisite for electors of the most numerous branch of the state legislatures. I know, just because I say it like excitedly, still doesn't seem to make it really cool. Here's what it means, and here's what the 17th Amendment changes. So, in the Constitution, all right, and we haven't really got here in detail yet, there's a 2-house legislature, all right, and later in this unit we're going to talk about this. You got the House of Representatives, all right, and the amount of representatives you have is based on your state, how many people live in your state. The Senate, all right, has a set number of representatives. Today there's 100 because there's 50 states and there's 2 from each state. So everybody in the Senate, each state has 2 senators, all right? However, with the way the Constitution was originally designed, the people, us, in the states, we voted for our representatives in the House of Representatives. That was supposed to be the House of the people, all right? That was the people's house. The Senate, all right, that house, the state appointed those people. So those were like career politicians, and whoever is running the state, it's like, we're going to pick Bobby and Joey, and they're going to be our representatives. What was happening, all right, when the people did not elect the senators at the state level or at the federal level, is these big corporations, and that's what this cartoon is talking about here. You got big steel, copper, like Standard Oil. These companies will go to the state government and be like, we want you to appoint these 2 guys right here that will do good things for me, and here's a bunch of money to do it. It really led to, you can use the word corruption. It led to a lot of money being exchanged, and basically the rich people, these big corporations, basically were running a lot of America because they could throw money at the state governments because they didn't have to worry about voters or anything like that. All they had to do is just give a bunch of money to a couple people that made these decisions, and they could appoint these senators to the federal government. It got so bad that they finally agreed in the late 1800s that, you know what, probably not a good thing. So they passed the 17th Amendment. The 17th Amendment is the direct election of senators, all right? Direct means the people vote for the senators. So, like today in North Carolina, where this is being recorded at, when we go to vote, we vote who our 2 federal representative senators are for the state of North Carolina. The 17th Amendment does that. It used to be in the original Constitution, the governor or just the state itself picked. So politicians picked who other politicians were to represent you, and the people only voted in the House of Representatives. 17th Amendment says, no, we need to give the people more power because voting is incredibly important in American society. And we're going to start talking more about that as we go through. The power to vote is crucial. So the 17th Amendment gives more power to the people because it allows the people the ability to vote for who's going to be in the Senate, which is a very strong part of the government. All right? So the question here is, the 17th Amendment was designed to give who more power in the government, and how so? We just started talking about it. So the question here is, who did it give more power to? Well, it didn't give the government more power, it gave the people more power. So pause me, go through, answer this in complete sentences, and when you do, unpause me, and we're moving on. Okay, the 18th Amendment. Now, this is cool, all right? So the 18th Amendment, all right, is going to ban alcohol in the United States. So it says, Section 2, this article shall be inoperative unless it shall have been ratified as an amendment to the Constitution by the legislatures of several states as provided in the Constitution within 7 years from the day of the submission hereof to the state by the Congress. Yeah, that don't even make no sense to me. All right. They made it wordy, and they basically put like different clauses in it for out. They knew this was going to be a touchy one. So this is, to simplify it, is worded very lawyerishly. All right. So that it doesn't make people super, super angry. But it's going to. Now, in order to have an amendment added to the Constitution, you have to have wildly overwhelming support for the amendment. Like, you can't just like do it because you have the majority. It's like everybody has to agree in the government. So obviously this had to have a lot of support at the time, which it did. There had been a whole movement taking place in the 1800s called the temperance movement. Temperance is the movement against alcohol. All right. America was founded, as we have talked about, on these Protestant ideals. Generally speaking, Protestants, religious people, are less open to alcohol consumption than Catholics. Generally speaking, that might just be a stereotype. But generally speaking, that's how it works. So America, being predominantly Protestant, was more against alcohol than a lot of other places around the world. Not only were they religiously against it, they realized that alcohol doesn't really provide a lot of positives in society. There's a lot of negatives in society, all right? Such as drunkenness, and typically the people who suffer the most negative side effects of alcohol in society are women, because the men are the ones that and when I'm talking about, people drank very heavily in the 1800s, that men would and husbands would go spend a lot of the money, the very limited amount of money that they had, on alcohol. Women were subjected to a lot of domestic violence and things like that as a result of alcohol. So not surprising, one of the biggest biggest groups against alcohol was women, and women's religious groups, like the Women's Christian Temperance Movement, all right, really started pushing in the 1800s to get rid of alcohol in society because it doesn't add anything positive, all right? So they try it one time. They're like, all right, well, let's just see what happens if you make alcohol illegal in a small area and see what happens. So they try this. They're going to make, the first place they're going to make alcohol illegal at is in the state of Maine. When they make alcohol illegal in the state of Maine, you know what happens? All of a sudden, all the alcohol-related problems in Maine go away. And it looks like the most like all you have to do is make alcohol illegal, and all the problems go away. So people pointed to Maine over and over and over and over and over, and they're like, look at Maine. Maine did it right, all right? Maine doesn't have all these alcohol problems. What we'll learn later is if you lived in Maine and you wanted alcohol and Maine makes alcohol illegal, people just left Maine and went somewhere else. So it wasn't the best experiment. So, but the movement gets strong enough that the 18th Amendment to the Constitution says alcohol in the United States is illegal. And this is going to lead, it's a time period called Prohibition. You're prohibiting something, all right? Prohibition says alcohol is illegal in the United States, all right? The 18th Amendment is different than any of the previous amendments because the 18th Amendment is the first amendment that denies people the ability to do something. All the other amendments were basically a buffer between the government and the people to make sure everybody is treated fairly or giving people more rights. The 18th Amendment says, you can't do this. So it's a very different amendment. It's the only amendment that denies people the ability to do something. But it did have overwhelming support. That's how an amendment gets passed. Almost instantaneously. Once the 18th Amendment is passed, everybody's like, yay, I'm so glad we passed this. This is great. Woo, let's go celebrate. Let's go have a beer. And they're like, yeah, you can't do that. And they're like, what? this is bull, and everybody gets like really, like almost instantaneously. Prohibition becomes relatively unpopular very fast. You start seeing tons of people, if you can't go buy alcohol legally, they would just make their own. They would import it in illegally. They would have like secret bars called speakeasies. People that would like make and transport alcohol, like got names like bootleggers. Organized crime is going to skyrocket. And pretty quickly it becomes obvious that the 18th Amendment and prohibiting alcohol is not a super popular thing in America. However, they changed the Constitution for this. Like the Constitution, which is that is the final say-so of everything, says you can't have alcohol. So puts kind of everybody in a precarious situation because the Constitution has officially been changed to say you can't have alcohol, even though it appears that the majority of people aren't upset if alcohol is made legal again. So the question here is, how is the 18th Amendment different than any previous amendment? All right, and this is the big one about rights as far as allowing people to do stuff or prohibiting them from doing stuff. We had talked about that. That's what I'm looking for here. What was different about the 18th Amendment than the previous ones before it? All right, so pause me, answer this in 2 complete sentences, and we'll move on. All right, this brings us to the 19th, 20th, and 21st. All 3 of these are really cool. So the 19th Amendment, all right, I love it. The 19th Amendment says the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. The 19th Amendment is huge. Huge with a Y. Huge. The 19th Amendment is huge because it gives women the right to vote. All right. Now, the 19th Amendment is made in 1919. It's not ratified or accepted until the 20th Amendment. Till 1920. But 1919 is the 19th Amendment. It's an easy way of putting that there. So, African American men got the right to vote in 1867. It takes until 1919 for them to be like, who else should have the right to vote? Women. So in U.S. history, we'll talk a lot more about the process for women's suffrage, which means the right to vote, the motivation for it. Was the reason women weren't allowed to vote, was it based on sexism? Yes, but not entirely, because the concepts of voting were new. We had kind of created what our idea of voting was. So while, yes, there absolutely was sexism in the Protestant environment that America was founded on, men and women had very clear-cut roles. Everything was a clear-cut role. Men did this, women did this. Men weren't supposed to do women jobs, women weren't supposed to do men jobs, all right? The idea was they're both equally as important. How often that ideal actually presented itself in society is questionable. But so it was like, of course we wouldn't let men and women do the same thing like vote. By 1919, people realized times are changing. There's also one very specific situation, because this movement had been growing since the 1800s, of women saying we deserve the right to vote. It's, the representatives, the government affects us too. We have a right to vote for our representatives, for the president, for literally anything that affects our life. So this movement had been growing. The huge final nail in the coffin that happens where everybody's like, what? You're absolutely right. It was World War I. So World War I started in 1914. America's going to get involved in 1917. So when World War I happens and America has to get this huge army together and then send them across the Atlantic Ocean over to Europe to fight Germany and the Central Powers, when that happens, you need tons of supplies. And the way you're going to get those supplies is they're all going to get built in the factories. So who works in the factories? Men. Not during World War I, because where's all the men at? They're over fighting. So who makes all the equipment so that the men can go fight? The women. The women who had never worked in factories, a large percent had never worked in factories, they're all going to show up, they're going to go to the factories, and they're going to work in the factories, and they are going to provide the massive amount of stuff needed for World War I. So when World War I ends and America wins, it was obviously, it couldn't have been done without women. But it was also, women don't work in factories, that's men's job. But when it came down to it, women could do the exact same thing men could. And that was the final, like this movement was probably going to happen even without World War I. But when it was obvious that women can contribute equally to society as men, in a time of war where all the production had to be up, it became pretty obvious that women should be treated as equal in society, and the easiest way to do that was to give women the right to vote, which is the 19th Amendment. Right after World War I, women get the right to vote, fundamentally going to change politics in America forever. Because once you have the right to vote, people care about you. Women are half of the population. You just doubled the amount of voters. Now all of a sudden, when you run for president or senator or state representative, guess who you have to care about? Women. You have to give credence to women's concerns, something that you didn't have to care about because they couldn't vote. All of a sudden, politics are fundamentally going to change to cater equally to men and women, and it makes our society much more inclusive. The 19th Amendment fundamentally changes politics because instead of the government and politicians only focusing on men's desires because that's the only people that could vote for them, now you're looking at what's good for men and women. So that's the question here. How did the 19th Amendment forever change politics in America as a whole? Pause me, answer that, and we're going to move on. All right, the 20th Amendment. The 20th Amendment is really like, it's random. All right, so the 20th Amendment says the Congress shall assemble at least once in every year, and such a meeting shall be at noon on the 3rd day of January, unless they shall by law appoint a different day. All right, that's not the big part. The next one is, if at the time fixed the beginning of term of president, the president shall have elected have died, it goes through. You know what? I didn't even put the section on here. Oh, look at me. Look at me. I messed this all up. So listen to it. What it does is it moves the inauguration date from the president from March back a couple months to January. That's the big one on the 20th Amendment. So it clearly does do some other stuff. But the main one is it moves the inauguration date from the president from March back to January. The reason this is cool is it is the most petty amendment that we have. All right, this is crazy. So you'll like this. It's kind of dumb, which makes it fun. All right, so there's this dude named Herbert Hoover who was president in 1920. He gets elected in 1929. Everybody likes him, or 1928. Everybody likes him. Then the Great Depression happens in 1929, and the entire economy collapses. Everybody is homeless. Like oh my gosh! Like everybody's desperately looking for a job. The thing has collapsed. Herbert Hoover has this idea of rugged individualism. He doesn't think the government should help. He's like, it's not our place. We didn't cause this problem. We shouldn't have to help it out. Let them figure it out on their own. The population isn't a big fan of this at all. So at the midterm elections in 1930, so Herbert Hoover is a Republican. Like all Democrats get elected to Congress. And Hoover's like, uh-oh, this isn't good. So he's like 2 years into his term in office. They do the midterm elections, which they elect Congress, the Senate, House of Representatives. They're all the other parties. So he has like no friends left in the government. He still has 2 years until he has to run for president again. In 1932, he's going to run for president. So this is on the left here. This is Herbert Hoover. This is the president. He's going to run against a Democrat named Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1932. Franklin Delano Roosevelt wins in an absolute landslide because nobody likes Hoover. All right. There's other stuff that causes people not to like Hoover, but nobody likes Hoover. So when you're elected president, so 1932 is when the election happens. You're elected in November, but you don't actually take office until the following March, which is the inauguration. And the reason it's set up like that in the Constitution is you had horse and wagon. It takes you a while to move from wherever you're at down to or up to Washington, D.C. and get set up. It takes you about 5 months. Well, you know, we have the cars and stuff now at this point in 1932, So Congress, who is all Democrats, say, you know what we could do? We could move that up. And they make an amendment. They add some other stuff in there, so some logistical stuff. But they basically moved up the inauguration to swear into president, basically to get Hoover out faster, so that they could swear in FDR. It's like the most petty of petty amendments, but they did officially move the inauguration from March back a couple months to January. So if you're running for president and you win your election in November, you're not immediately the president. You now have to wait till January to officially be sworn in, but it used to be March. Very petty. So what was the motivation behind the inauguration date from March to January? And we talked about that. It's petty. All right. So here is the current situation that happens. This happens when FDR is president. It's the 21st Amendment. The 21st Amendment says, this article shall be inoperative unless it shall have been ratified as an amendment to the Constitution by conventions of the several states and provides the Constitution within 7 years from the date of submission hereof to the states of the country. Like, dude, why are they all like this? What was the other one that was just like this? Do you remember from earlier in the lesson? It was the 18th Amendment. The one that said alcohol is illegal. Yeah, they're going to change that. So people want to repeal the 18th Amendment. Means let's get rid of the 18th Amendment. Everybody who has these bumper stickers on the back of their car, that's like a tire on the back of a car, like the cover, the tire cover. Repeal the 18th Amendment. Yeah, you can't. It's an amendment. It's a permanent thing. You can't repeal it. So it's always going to be there. It's still there today. The Constitution still, the 18th Amendment says alcohol is illegal. All right. However, the 21st Amendment is an amendment that says you don't have to worry about the 18th Amendment anymore. The 21st Amendment literally says forget about the 18th Amendment, because you can't erase something in the Constitution. Once it's there forever. So you can't repeal the 18th Amendment. You can only add to the Constitution and change it again. So the 18th Amendment, which denied people the right to alcohol, basically gets nullified with another amendment, the 21st Amendment, that says, yeah, you can. All right. The best way of remembering the 18th and 21st present day, when you're 18 years old, you're an adult, but you can't drink alcohol when you're 18. Can't drink alcohol at 18, even though you're an adult. However, what's the drinking age? Is 21. So like 21st Amendment makes alcohol legal. So that's a good way of remembering that is 21 years old, alcohol is legal to you. 21st Amendment makes alcohol legal again in the Constitution. So the question here is, why was the 21st Amendment necessary? And why couldn't they just erase the 18th Amendment? So basically, like, why did they have to make another amendment? Why couldn't they just repeal the 18th Amendment? Like, why was it like that? All right, that's as far as we're going to get today. See you guys tomorrow.